A Guide to Growing Lettuce. Arguably the most well-known salad green, lettuce is made up of 95% water. Despite that high water content, lettuce also contains a good amount of vitamins and nutrients. And though it makes the perfect salad base, lettuce also adds a nice crisp crunch to wraps, tacos, and sandwiches. Lettuce varieties. Lettuce is typically divided up into a few main categories. Crisp head, which includes Summertimes, Salinas, Iceberg. Its thin and crisp leaves often have curled or serrated edges. Butterhead, which includes Buttercrunch, Esmeralda. This variety has loosely folded leaves that are green on the outer parts and cream or yellow on the inner ones. It bruises and tears easily, so it needs careful handling. Romaine, which includes Lentissima, Italian blonde romaine. This lettuce variety grows upright. Its outer leaves are smooth and green, while the inner leaves are colored whitish to green. Leaf, which includes red sails, oak leaf, salad bowl. Leafy varieties don't form a head. Their leaves can be serrated or crinkled, and the colors vary from light green to red. To germinate, lettuce's ideal soil temperature is between 50 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 to 24 degrees Celsius. Any temperatures that are above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 26 degrees Celsius, can have quite a negative impact on the seed's germination process. Seeds also need light to germinate, so avoid covering them too heavily with soil. Seeds can be sown about a quarter to a half inch, 0.6 to 1.3 centimeters deep. Once the plants have 3 to 4 true leaves, they should be thinned to be 8 to 12 inches, 20 to 30 centimeters apart. The best part about thinning lettuce is that the plants that have been thinned can actually be transplanted elsewhere in the garden, just as long as some of their roots are still intact. Both seeded and transplanted lettuce should be spaced 8 to 12 inches, 20 to 30 centimeters apart, in rows that are 18 to 36, 46 to 91 centimeters apart. Lettuce prefers sandy, well-draining soil with a pH between 6.0 to 7.0, and it won't tolerate acid soils, so the soil may need to be amended first. Lettuce needs full sun to thrive, but in hot weather, partial shade can be helpful. It grows best when air temperatures don't go above 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 24 degrees Celsius, and lettuce can also tolerate temperatures down to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. Water stress causes plants to grow bitter, so water lettuce regularly. Too much water stress, as well as high temperatures at night, can cause the lettuce to bolt. Since lettuce is also shallow-rooted, it's important to avoid disturbing their roots when working in the soil, like when removing weeds. Work some compost into the soil at least 3 weeks before planting lettuce. Also, 4 to 6 cups of an all-purpose fertilizer can be applied for each 100 square feet, 9 meters squared, before planting. Side dress with some nitrogen fertilizer, 21 to 0 to 0, about 4 weeks after transplanting or thinning. Then water it into the soil. Mulch with straw, grass clippings, or wood chips to avoid water stress and to keep the soil cool as temperatures rise. Mulch also controls the growth of weeds, which can compete with lettuce for water and nutrients. Harden off lettuce seedlings about 3 days before transplanting by reducing their water and setting them outside a few hours each day. When properly hardened off, lettuce plants can withstand temperatures as cold as 20 degrees Fahrenheit, -6 degrees Celsius. Transplants should have 4 to 6 true leaves before they're set outdoors, which usually takes about 5 to 6 weeks. Place crisphead and romaine variety transplants 10 to 12 inches apart, 25 to 30 centimeters, in rows that are 18 inches, 45 centimeters apart. For other varieties, place them 8 inches, 20 centimeters apart, in rows that are 12 to 18 inches, 30 to 45 centimeters apart. Beets, brassicas, carrots, celery, cucumbers, dill, onions, radish, spinach, squash, and strawberries will all grow well with lettuce. Avoid planting lettuce near parsley. They don't grow well together. Raised beds. Raised beds improve the drainage of soil, which will also have a higher temperature than the ground. This helps prevent the spread of certain diseases that favor cool and/or moist conditions. Raised beds also minimize the amount that plants are disturbed, since there's no need to step on the soil around the lettuce plants to work on them. Containers. These are a great option if there is limited garden space. The pot should be big enough to accommodate the roots, and also that it has holes in the bottom for water drainage. If the soil can't drain properly, it can cause diseases, like root rot to the lettuce plant. Open field. First, check the soil for fertilizer needs and possible disease infection before planting. As well, with an open field, plants won't need to be watered as frequently as container-raised plants. Aphids. These tiny pests come in a variety of colors: green, black, red, light orange, or yellow, and mainly feed on the undersides of leaves and stems. What they're actually feeding on is the sap in plants, which ends up causing the plants damage. Aphids also leave behind a sticky substance called honeydew, and they are a pest that's known to spread diseases. Aphids can be tolerated by most plants when their numbers are low, but if there's a lot of aphids, they can stunt a plant's growth and cause a plant's leaves to turn yellow and fall off. Here's what to do. For the most part, plants can handle mild aphid infestations. But if they're found, a strong jet of water from a garden hose will wash them off the plants. Spraying plants with water should be done early in the morning so that the plants can dry off during the day. Sticky traps, neem oil, insecticidal soaps, and horticultural oils are also effective against aphids. Just be sure to follow the application instructions on the packaging. Oftentimes, you can also get rid of aphids by wiping or spraying the leaves with a mild solution of water and a few drops of dish soap. One variation includes adding a pinch of cayenne pepper. Soapy water should be reapplied every 2 to 3 days for about 2 weeks. As well, you can try to attract beneficial insects like lady beetles, hoverflies, and lacewings, all of which are important aphid predators. Make sure to check all transplants for aphids before planting. And keep in mind that aphids aren't very mobile, so it's not uncommon to find one heavily affected plant surrounded by plants that are fine. If this is the case, simply remove and destroy the infected plant. Flea beetles. Small beetles that are either black, a blue color, bronze, gray, or sometimes striped. Flea beetles jump when they're disturbed, and they also shimmer in the light. Flea beetles feed on leaves and seedlings, and the damage from their feeding habits can stunt a plant's growth, reduce yields, spread diseases, or kill seedlings off entirely. Young plants are especially vulnerable, while older plants can survive an infestation much better. Here's what to do. Use a lightweight floating row cover at the beginning of the season to prevent flea beetles from becoming an issue. There's also a homemade spray that uses 2 cups of rubbing alcohol, 5 cups of water, and 1 tablespoon of liquid soap that can work to repel these bugs. Test out this mixture on a single leaf first. Let it sit overnight, then spray the rest of the plant if there aren't any side effects. Dusting plants with plain talcum powder can also help, as well as using white sticky traps to capture these pests as they jump. As well, weeds attract and shelter flea beetles, so it's important to keep weed growth under control. Insecticides might help for about a week, but they'll need to be reapplied, and adding a layer of mulch is yet another option. Be sure to practice crop rotation and plant seeds early to give them lots of time to establish themselves before the beetles become a problem. Mature plants are less susceptible to damage, so make sure to protect more vulnerable seedlings. Slugs and snails. These slimy pests are either hard-shelled or soft, and they are nocturnal creatures who feed on the leaves and stems of a plant during the night. The feeding damage from these pests leaves irregular-shaped holes behind. Leaves can also be shredded or eaten entirely, and there will also be slime trails on nearby rocks, plants, and walkways. These pests thrive in damp conditions, damage a plant's growth, and also affect a plant's ability to form roots. Here's what to do. Wet conditions encourage slugs and snails. So, although it's important to keep the soil moist, it's just as important not to overwater any plants. As well, avoid overhead watering and keep any organic waste away from plants. If possible, hand-pick any slugs or snails at night, which is when those pests are most active. Beer traps are another way to handle a snail or slug problem. For this, dig a hole in the ground and place a large cup or bowl into the hole. It's best to use something with steep sides so that the slugs can't crawl back out when they're done, like a mason jar. Fill the jar about half full with beer and let it sit overnight. In the morning, the jar should then be full of drowned slugs that can then be flushed down the toilet. Another option is to place a barrier of diatomaceous earth, a natural powder made up of the skeletons of tiny aquatic creatures, around plants to keep snails and slugs away. Potential diseases and their solutions. Downy mildew. This fungal disease thrives in cool, humid climates. At first, downy mildew causes leaves to turn yellow, typically starting from the main vein, then spreading outward. Fungal spores that are grayish, purple, fuzzy spots will then grow on the undersides of leaves. Downy mildew typically affects young, tender leaves, and severe infections can also cause curled and distorted leaves. Sometimes those affected leaves can then become dehydrated and then drop from the plant entirely. When seedlings are affected, their growth is stunted, and downy mildew can also reduce crop yields while acting as an entry point for other diseases. When older plants are affected, in addition to the lesions they get, they will also seem more rigid and narrow as compared to healthy plants. Here's what to do. Plant resistant varieties when possible. Practice good crop rotation. Ensure good air circulation around plants. And water plants early in the morning. This last tip gives the plants enough time to dry out during the day, making those plants less vulnerable to infection. Downy mildew is usually spread when leaves are wet for too long, so it also helps to avoid overhead watering. As well, be sure to keep weeds from growing. Once plants have downy mildew, the best thing to try is to eliminate moisture and humidity around the infected plants. If possible, try to improve their air circulation through selective pruning. In general, downy mildew normally clears itself up in an outdoor garden once the weather warms up, since it doesn't do well in warm temperatures. Also, if there are any infected plants, be sure to remove all crop remains after harvest to avoid reinfection, since this fungus can survive in crop residue. Keep in mind, too, that downy mildew is much easier to control when a plant's leaves and fruit are kept protected by a copper spray. Copper treatments can begin 2 weeks before the disease normally appears, and when a long period of wet weather is in store. Copper treatments can also start when the disease first appears. Then those treatments can be repeated at 7 to 10 day intervals for as long as the treatments are needed. leaf spot. Circular, deep purple spots will first appear on the upper leaves. These spots then grow, and the spot's centers turn grayish to white on older leaves and light brown on young leaves. These spots will also have a defined reddish purple to rusty brown border, and as the spots grow, those spots dry out. The stems of affected plants will also wilt, and severe infections can become an entry point for other rotting diseases. Here's what to do. Plant disease-free seeds when possible. Also, avoid long leaf wetness by watering in the morning, avoiding overhead watering, and by spacing plants properly. It helps to avoid working in the garden when plants are wet, since leaf spot is mainly spread by splashing water. As well, it's important to practice crop rotation. If leaf spot is present, remove any infected plants to prevent the disease from spreading. Mosaic rust. A virus that's typically spread by aphids. It causes leaf malformation, the yellowing of plants, and it also stunts the growth of plants. Here's what to do. Plant resistant varieties when it's possible to do so. Using mineral oil can also be effective against aphid pests, who transmit the mosaic rust disease. If any plants have the mosaic virus, be sure to remove and destroy them. Harvesting. Harvesting. For crisphead, harvest this variety when the heads are firm. For butterhead, harvest when the heads are in an early maturing stage. For leaf, this lettuce can be picked any time after the leaves have formed, but should be picked before the seed stalk forms. Older leaves can be stripped off the plant to give younger ones more space to grow. When harvesting lettuce, either pick leaves or harvest their whole heads by cutting them at the soil level. Harvest earlier rather than later, because the more mature the leaves grow, the more bitter they become. We recommend harvesting in the morning when lettuce's leaves will be crisp and full of moisture. Storing. Lettuce can be stored for about 1 to 2 weeks in the fridge, either wrapped in moist towels or in plastic bags.